The water is dark. Not the dark of a moonless night, but something older. Something that has been dark for longer than there have been eyes to see it. You are 60 feet below the surface of the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Guadalupe Island, Mexico. There is no sound except the rhythmic percussion of your own breathing. The visibility is extraordinary. You can see perhaps 100 feet in every direction, which means you can see exactly what is coming. It materializes from the blue like a hallucination. 700 pounds of cartilage and muscle and ancient instinct, moving without apparent effort, covering distance in a way that seems to defy the geometry of the space around it. The great white shark does not swim toward you the way a fish swims. It arrives. One moment it is distant, the next moment it is not. Your heart rate, according to researchers who have measured this exact moment on experienced divers, spikes to over 140 beats per minute. Your body knows something your mind is still processing. And yet, the shark does not touch you. It curves, investigates, and disappears back into the blue. In that moment, you have experienced what 350 million years of evolution has produced. Not a monster, not a mindless killing machine, something far more remarkable and far more fragile than popular culture has ever allowed you to understand. Everything you think you know about sharks was shaped by a movie made in 1975. It's time to meet the real animal. Here is the central paradox of the shark. It is simultaneously one of the most feared animals on Earth and one of the most misunderstood. More people are killed annually by vending machines than by sharks. More people die from allergic reactions to bee stings in a single month in the United States than have died from shark attacks in the entire recorded history of the country. And yet Jaws remains the highest-grossing film of its era, and a significant percentage of adults report a genuine, disabling fear of swimming in the ocean, even in water that is demonstrably shark-free. This is not simply a curiosity of human psychology. The consequences are deadly, not for us, but for them. Fueled by fear, the global shark fin trade reached its peak in the 1990s and early 2000s, when researchers from Dalhousie University estimated that between 70 and 100 million sharks were killed per year. Not harvested as a food source, finned, meaning the fins were sliced off while the animal was still alive, and the body was discarded back into the ocean to drown, because sharks, unlike bony fish, must keep moving to breathe. Populations of oceanic white-tip sharks, once described by Jacques Cousteau as the most dangerous of all sharks, have declined by more than 98% in the Gulf of Mexico over the past half-century. Hammerhead populations in the Atlantic have dropped by roughly 90%. Globally, according to a landmark 2021 study published in the journal Nature, more than one-third of all shark and ray species are now threatened with extinction. Pause on that. Species that have existed on this planet for longer than trees, species that survived the Permian extinction, the event that killed 96% of all marine life on Earth, species that survived the meteor impact that ended the dinosaurs, now facing extinction because of us, because of a fear that, as we will see, is built almost entirely on a foundation of misunderstanding. The question this documentary asks is not simply, are sharks dangerous? That question is, at this point, settled. The more important question is, why do we think they are? Where did that image come from? What is the actual biology of a shark? And what does the science say about what happens to an ocean and to us when we remove them? To answer those questions, we have to go back. A very long way back. 450 million years ago, the Earth's oceans were very different places. The land was largely barren. The first vascular plants were only beginning to colonize the edges of continents. The dominant life forms on Earth were marine invertebrates, trilobites, nautiloids, primitive fish. And in those ancient seas, something new appeared in the fossil record. The first sharks were not the apex predators we know today. Early shark-like forms belonging to a group called Clada salish were relatively small, roughly 6 feet in length, and their teeth were nothing like the serrated blades of modern species. But they shared something essential with every shark alive today. They were made of cartilage, not bone. This is the first thing that surprises most people about sharks. They are not bony fish. They belong to a class called chondrichthyes, cartilaginous fish. And this structural choice has profound consequences for everything about how they live. Cartilage is lighter than bone, which reduces the shark's buoyancy problem without requiring a swim bladder, the gas-filled organ that most bony fish use to regulate their depth. Sharks maintain their position in the water column through a combination of constant swimming, the lift generated by their pectoral fins, and a liver that, in some species, accounts for up to 30% of the animal's body weight and is saturated with low-density oil called squalene. They cannot stop swimming, or rather, many species cannot. The obligate ram ventilators, which include great whites, makos, and salmon sharks, must keep water flowing over their gills continuously, which means forward motion is not merely preferable, it is existential. They are among the few animals on Earth for whom stopping is the same as dying. The teeth of a shark deserve their own chapter. Unlike human teeth, which are anchored in the jawbone and replaced only once, shark teeth grow in conveyor belt rows, each row sitting behind the last. When a tooth in the front row is lost or worn, which happens frequently, since shark teeth are not designed for longevity but for replaceability, the next row migrates forward to take its place. Over the course of a lifetime, a single shark may produce and shed tens of thousands of teeth. This is why fossil shark teeth are among the most commonly found vertebrate fossils in the world, while shark skeletons are exceptionally rare. Cartilage degrades, teeth mineralize, and persist for millions of years. But the sensory system of a shark is where the animal becomes genuinely extraordinary, and where the popular image of a mindless, reflexive predator begins to collapse entirely. Sharks possess a sensory organ found in no terrestrial vertebrate, the ampullae of Lorenzini. These are jelly-filled pores concentrated around the snout and head of the shark, and they detect bioelectric fields, the minute electrical signals produced by the muscle contractions and nerve firings of living organisms. Every animal with a heartbeat produces an electric field. Sharks can detect fields as weak as 5/1 billionths of a volt per centimeter. In practical terms, this means a shark can locate prey buried under 6 inches of sand by the electrical signal of its heartbeat alone. It can navigate using the Earth's magnetic field. It can, according to research published by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, detect the electrical disturbance created by ocean currents moving through the Earth's magnetic field, essentially reading a map of the ocean written in electricity that no other sense can perceive. There is also the lateral line, a system of sensory cells running along the length of the shark's body that detect pressure waves and vibrations in the water. A shark can hear a struggling fish from extraordinary distances through the lateral line alone, before its eyes or nose are remotely useful. And then there is the olfactory system. Sharks can detect blood in the water at concentrations of 1 part per million, roughly equivalent to detecting a single drop of blood diluted into an Olympic swimming pool. This has been widely used as evidence of menace. What it actually is evidence of an animal exquisitely tuned to its environment. The brain of a shark is proportionally comparable to the brain of many mammalian species. For decades, sharks were categorized as simple, instinct-driven predators. This view has been overturned comprehensively by behavioral research conducted over the last 3 decades. Sharks have been documented engaging in play behavior. They form social hierarchies. Individual sharks in certain populations have been shown to have distinct personalities, some consistently bold, others consistently cautious, a trait that was, until recently, considered the exclusive province of mammals and birds. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Fish Biology documented individual personality variation in Port Jackson sharks, with consistent behavioral differences persisting over time and across different experimental contexts. Great white sharks, in particular, have been the subject of increasingly sophisticated tracking research. Using acoustic tags and satellite telemetry, researchers from Stanford's Hopkins Marine Station and the Monterey Bay Aquarium have mapped the migrations of individual great whites across thousands of miles of open ocean, revealing consistent annual patterns. migrations between coastal feeding grounds in California and winter destinations in a deep water region of the Pacific nicknamed the White Shark Cafe, where the animals congregate in numbers and dive repeatedly to depths that serve no obvious feeding purpose. The behavior is not yet fully understood. The hypothesis that sharks are mindless killing machines is. And what of the attacks? In 2023, the International Shark Attack File, maintained by the Florida Museum of Natural History and representing the most comprehensive database of shark-human interactions in existence, recorded 69 unprovoked shark bites on humans worldwide. 14 were fatal. For context, in the same year, approximately 150 people were killed in the United States alone by domestic dogs. Roughly 450 people die annually in the U.S. from falling out of bed. The global shark fatality rate is not merely low, it is vanishingly low, almost impossibly low, given that over 1 billion people enter the ocean each year. The reason most shark-human interactions end without injury is not that sharks are timid or indifferent, it is that humans are not prey. Great whites are apex predators that specialize in marine mammals, seals, sea lions, and dolphins, which have a caloric density approximately 4 to 5 times higher than an equivalent mass of human muscle. When a shark bites a human, the prevailing scientific interpretation is investigatory behavior. Sharks do not have hands. They explore novel objects with their mouths. A bite that leaves a human with lacerations is, from the shark's perspective, a taste test that produced an unsatisfactory result. The animal almost always withdraws. In 1916, a series of shark attacks along the New Jersey coastline killed 4 people over 12 days. The attacks occurred in summer, during a heat wave, when ocean swimming had recently become fashionable among the American middle class. The hysteria was immediate and disproportionate. President Woodrow Wilson convened a cabinet meeting to address the crisis. The press ran coverage of a magnitude that bore no relationship to the statistical reality, and a cultural template was established that would persist, mutate, and intensify for the next century. Peter Benchley, who wrote the novel on which Spielberg's Jaws was based, spent much of the last decade of his life expressing regret about what his book had set in motion. He became an ocean conservationist. He stated explicitly that the great white shark depicted in Jaws, vindictive, territorial, obsessive in its pursuit of human prey, bore no relationship to the biology of the actual animal. He said that had he known then what he knew later, he would not have written the book. But the book had already become the film, and the film had already become the cultural reality in which most people now lived. The consequences of that reality are written in the ocean. In Australian waters, where shark culling programs have been active for decades, drumlines and nets set to protect beaches have killed not only sharks, but dolphins, sea turtles, dugongs, and rays, all considered bycatch, all legally permissible losses in the service of human fear. In the Bahamas, where sharks were historically fished commercially, a watershed study by the Reef Environmental Education Foundation found that eliminating shark fishing and establishing a shark sanctuary, as the Bahamian government did in 2011, produced a dramatic recovery in both shark populations and overall reef fish diversity within years. The sharks were not incidental to the reef ecosystem, they were central to it. This is the concept of trophic cascades, and it is one of the most important ideas in marine ecology. When apex predators are removed from a marine ecosystem, the effects do not stop at the level of the predator's direct prey. They cascade down through every trophic level in ways that can fundamentally alter the physical structure of the environment. In the absence of sharks, populations of rays and large predatory fish, the species sharks ordinarily regulate, explode. Those species then decimate the shellfish and smaller fish they prey upon. Seagrass beds are overgrazed, coral reefs destabilize, the whole architecture of the ecosystem, built over millions of years around the organizing presence of the apex predator, begins to disassemble. A 2007 study led by researchers at Dalhousie University examined what happened to scallops and shellfish populations along the eastern seaboard of the United States as shark populations declined over the second half of the 20th century. The cascading effects were so severe that century-old commercial scallop fisheries, Industries that had supported coastal communities for generations collapsed entirely in some areas. The absence of sharks had, over several decades, restructured the food web thoroughly enough to make entire human livelihoods economically non-viable. There is also the question of carbon. Healthy shark populations help regulate the populations of large fish, which in turn graze on phytoplankton and zooplankton that form the base of the marine food web. Phytoplankton alone account for roughly 50% of all photosynthesis on Earth. They absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. The stability of the ocean's phytoplankton communities is not independent of apex predators at the top of the food chain. The ocean's capacity to regulate the global climate is not independent of sharks. When we remove them, we are not simply losing a species. We are destabilizing the most complex and most important biological system on the surface of this planet. In 2019, researchers from the University of Miami attached accelerometers and depth sensors to wild great white sharks off the coast of South Africa. What they discovered confounded their initial models. The sharks were not patrolling, they were not hunting in the frantic, aggressive manner of the popular image. They were conserving energy with extraordinary precision, making incremental adjustments to their swimming depth to exploit thermal layers and reduce drag, traveling at speeds and depths that minimized caloric expenditure per kilometer covered. They were not the relentless machines of cinema. They were athletes, managing their physiology with a sophistication that the researchers described as analogous to elite marathon runners deploying race strategy. This image, a great white shark at cruise depth in the open Pacific, adjusting its angle by 2 degrees to gain an efficiency advantage, having traveled perhaps 1,000 miles already on a route it will repeat again next year, is the one that the science now supports. Not a monster, an animal of extraordinary capability, shaped by forces so ancient that the word ancient barely applies. The lineage of sharks predates the formation of the Atlantic Ocean. They were already old when the supercontinent Pangaea began to break apart. They have survived, without fundamental redesign, through 5 mass extinction events, each of which reshaped the biosphere in ways that ended the evolutionary histories of species that had themselves dominated for millions of years. Whatever sharks are, they are not a failed experiment. They are, on the evidence, among the most successful large-bodied animals this planet has ever produced. And we are, within the span of a single human lifetime, driving them toward extinction. Shark fin trade continues, though it has declined significantly following campaigns in China and Southeast Asia that have made the consumption of shark fin soup culturally unacceptable in certain demographics. The International Union for Conservation of Nature now lists more than 1/3 of shark species as vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. Yet the legal framework for their protection remains fragmented, enforced inconsistently, and frequently undermined by the economic incentives of industrial fishing operations that list sharks as acceptable bycatch. There are reasons for measured optimism. Shark sanctuaries, areas of exclusive economic zone where shark fishing is prohibited, now cover more than 50 million square kilometers of ocean, including the waters of the Maldives, Honduras, the Bahamas, and the Marshall Islands. Citizen science projects, including the global Elasmobranch database maintained through collaboration between NOAA and dozens of research institutions, have expanded the quality of population data available to policymakers. And acoustic tagging programs have produced, for the first time, a granular, longitudinal picture of how individual shark populations move and behave, data that is slowly making the case, in the language that policy responds to, for what ecologists have known for years. Sharks are not optional. They are not a luxury of a complete ocean. They are a structural necessity, as essential to the function of marine ecosystems as the mycorrhizal networks that connect plant root systems are to terrestrial forests. Remove them, and the system does not simply lose a predator. It loses the organizing logic around which hundreds of millions of years of coevolution have been arranged. There is a thought experiment worth sitting with. Imagine that for the entirety of human civilization, from the first permanent settlements in Mesopotamia, through the construction of the pyramids, through the fall of Rome and the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution and the entire modern era, Sharks were doing what they have always done, patrolling the continental shelves, making the migrations, regulating the ecosystems, being, without any awareness of our presence or our fear, the cornerstone of the ocean's architecture. We arrived as a meaningful threat to them in approximately 1950. In less than 80 years, we have accomplished what 5 mass extinction events could not. Fear is a powerful thing. It shapes cultures and policies and industries. It turns an animal into a symbol, and once an animal has become a symbol, the actual biology becomes almost irrelevant to the conversation. The great white shark has been, for 50 years, a symbol of danger, something to be feared, to be destroyed, to be kept out of the water we want to swim in. But the ocean does not ask for our interpretation of its inhabitants. It asks only that the system function. And the system requires sharks, in numbers sufficient to do what they have done for 450 million years. The question is whether we can replace the image we built in 1975 with the one the science has given us. A 700-pound animal adjusting its swimming depth by 2 degrees somewhere in the dark Pacific, on a migration route older than the mountain ranges we name our rivers after. An animal that, if we allow it to survive, will still be doing this long after our civilizations have joined the fossil record. We named our fear after a fish. Perhaps it is time to learn the fish's actual name.